Election of 1937 in India and World War II. The 1937 elections were a watershed in the history of Congress and League relations, Muslim League, and by extension, of Hindu-Muslim relations. About 3 crore Indians gained voting rights in 1937, which was about 1/6 of the adult public. The suffrage was limited by prescribing land holdings, income tax criteria, and education criteria. The total number of seats was 1585, out of which 482 were reserved for Muslims. Congress won 707 seats, while the Muslim League could win only 109. Most of the Muslim seats were won by regional outfits: the Unionist Party in Punjab, the Sindh Union Party in Sindh, and the Krishak Praja Party in Bengal, which were led by Muslims not affiliated to the Muslim League. However, Congress suffered a bad reality check. It could not even find enough candidates to field Muslim seats. It fielded barely 58 candidates for the 482 seats and won 26 of them. So much for a party that claimed to represent all sections of the Indian family. Congress won 707 out of 1104 non-Muslim seats and formed governments in 8 provinces. Jinnah expected to be invited to join the government in the United Provinces, but the Congress dismissed his claim. This action changed Jinnah's relationship with Congress forever. From being an adversary, he became an implacable foe of the party. The discourse among Muslims had been divided between the concepts of Qaumiyat-e-Mutahida, which means India as a united nation of Hindus and Muslims, and Qaumiyat-e-Judagana, which means separate nations for Hindus and Muslims. A section in the clergy, led chiefly by Maulana Hussain Ahmed Madani of Deoband, favoured the former, whereas another section within Deoband, led by Ashraf Ali Thanawi, favoured the latter. Later on, Jamaat-e-Islami of Abul Ala Maududi also supported the idea of a united India. The Barelvis, led by Hamid Raza Barelvi and Naimuddin Muradabadi, completely opposed the independence of India without a separate future for Muslims. They were largely outside the Khilafat fold and cast their lot with Muhammad Iqbal and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. The renowned Sufi Pir Jamaat Ali Shah gave rousing sermons. Now it's a quote from his sermon: "Dear Muslims, today there are 2 banners. One belongs to Islam and the other to infidels. Which will you choose?" After 1937, the Muslim League started a mass contact program emphasizing religious identity in terms of the two-nation theory. I have already cited the letter that Muhammad Iqbal wrote to Jinnah in the previous video. The Congress's mass contact program, on the other hand, was entrusted to socialist Muslims who had little influence on the masses. World War II started with the invasion of Poland by Germany on 1st September 1939, and Britain joined the war along with France on 3rd September. Lord Linlithgow announced unilaterally that India would be a belligerent in the war. This was objected to by the Congress. The resignation of Congress ministries created a vacuum which was expertly exploited by the Muslim League. The Qaumiyat-e-Judagana, led by Barelvis and the Muslim League, gained the upper hand in the political space and promised full support to the British. The League also helped with the mobilization of combat troops. The jury is still out as to who was more responsible for the resignations, Mahatma Gandhi or Nehru. The resignation of Congress ministries was a terrible mistake because not only did it allow Muslim League to form a closer bond with the British, but it also allowed Jinnah to become the single node of Muslim politics for the British. The Deobandis, who had so assiduously countered the Barelvi narrative of the two-nation theory, felt cheated. This was their second setback in 2 decades. The first had been calling off the non-cooperation movement. The Muslim League was elated at this political folly of idealism on part of the Congress. They celebrated a Deliverance Day on 22nd December 1939, in which the Barelvi Maulanas took part wholeheartedly. Jinnah smelled the coffee. He had concluded that the easy pathway to Muslim masses lay through the Barelvi clerics. A representative quasi-federation of the major Sunni Sufi silsilas or tariqas, Chishti, Qadri, Naqshbandi and Surawardi, was always in the forefront of what Dr. Ambedkar called gangsters' method of politics, which was characterized by never-ending and ever-new unreasonable demands, followed by acrimony, denunciations, street rioting and victim playing. In this, the Muslim League was not far behind, so their fates intertwined. The Deobandis followed the dictum laid down by Shah Waliullah, Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi of Balakot fame, and were led by Maulana Azad. The Barelvis had found an able articulation from traditional clergy in Ahmed Raza Barelvi's sons, Hamid and Mustafa, in Naimuddin Muradabadi, in Ali Azmi, in the Sufi Peers, and in the All India Sunni Conference of the Barelvis. The Barelvis constituted 80% of the Sunni population. Jinnah, nominally a Shia, found them useful for this cause and vice versa. Deobandis nuanced their narrative tactically to gain the support of the Congress. As they were numerically much inferior to the Barelvis, barely 20% of the Sunnis. While the Congress leadership claimed to represent all sections of society, including Muslims, it had remained an almost exclusively Hindu party and was evident from the 1937 elections. However, its inability to claim the Hindu mantle made it a confused mass of leaders pulling in different directions. It became a big umbrella. Modernists, constitutionalists, traditionalists, Sanatanis, socialists, saints, all were clubbed together. And their appeasement of the clergy became their fatal mistake. In hindsight, the great hurry to pitchfork India into a mass movement made the Congress leadership give respectability to the Muslim clergy instead of giving it to the constitutionalist Muslims who had always been a part of it. People who otherwise lacked respectability except among radicalized sections of Muslim masses were given respectability by the Congress in 1918-1919. This approach continued right till the date a new government took an entirely fresh approach and did away with triple talaq in a bold new legislation, taking the advice of the progressive sections of Muslims. Arif Muhammad Khan, presently the governor of Kerala, has explained this phenomenon of Hindu guilt beautifully. He says that the same people who used to say that they were an equal and separate nation, Mili Qaumiyat, before 1947 and had forced the British and the Congress to concede their point, came back after the Shah Bano judgment in 1986 to say that they had a quote-unquote separate identity, or Mili Tashakhus, and the Congress again conceded their point of view. That was in the Shah Bano case. These very people are now talking of Mazhabi Pehchan, or religious identity. However, there was no Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru in 1986 to prevent Hindus from reacting, and Narendra Modi is merely the culmination of Hindu angst against this policy of appeasement that lasted nearly a century from 1916 of Lucknow Pact to 2014, which is Modi's victory in the general elections with full majority. Arif Muhammad Khan also made an important point that the Muslim clergy keeps scaring the community by telling them that there will be a Hindu Rashtra. He poo-pooed the idea, stating that even in a Hindu Rashtra there is no scriptural sanction for denying equal rights to minorities. However, because there is the concept of zimmi in Islam for non-Muslims, the Muslims are made to think by ulema that they will similarly become zimmis in a Hindu Rashtra, which is not the case.